The awakening of a slumbering power. The stars had always been silent, a vast, empty expanse where light years of distance separated the countless worlds. In the heart of this emptiness, the Milky Way stretched across space like a silent river. Within it, countless civilizations rose and fell, leaving behind only the whispers of their existence. But in this unyielding silence, one species lay dormant, their potential far beyond the comprehension of any other. Humanity. For centuries, humans had been known for their peaceful nature, oblivious to the grand power lying dormant within them. The Galactic Coalition, a powerful alliance of interstellar species, had long ruled over the galaxy. They had conquered planets, wiped out species, and established their dominance through war and deception. Yet, they had always dismissed Earth as insignificant. They believed the humans were weak, fragile, and content with their small corner of the universe. But that was a mistake. Commander Aroth of the Drakari fleet stood in the central war room, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. His fingers traced the familiar lines of various star systems, some peaceful, others teeming with conflict. Arotha's mind was preoccupied with a question that had haunted him for years: why had humanity never taken part in galactic struggles? Why did they seem to watch, untouched by the wars that ravaged the stars? Every time the Coalition tried to invade or gain control over Earth, the humans fought back, effortlessly, decisively, and with a strange calm that unsettled Aroth to his core. His voice cut through the tension in the room. "You mean to tell me the humans have been asleep this whole time?" His words were met with silence, and the gathered officers from various galactic races exchanged uneasy glances. Aroth had a reputation for strategic brilliance, but even he couldn't fathom the strange power humanity seemed to possess. Yulok, a battle-hardened tactician of the Vraks, broke the silence, his voice a low growl. "Our spies report minimal military activity. Yet every time we engage them, they wipe the floor with our forces as though it's a game." "I've seen it too," muttered General Zar, his long, sharp claws tapping on the table. "They don't even seem to care about winning. They strike once, with precision, and then disappear into the void. They're toying with us." The room stiffened at Zar's words. The idea that humanity, a species from a planet called Earth, could hold such power that could match or even surpass the most formidable warriors in the galaxy, seemed preposterous. They were small, short-lived, and had no visible ambition to expand or conquer. Their history was filled with internal struggles, wars that they had resolved among themselves, never once attempting to conquer the stars. So why, then, did they consistently overpower the mightiest fleets? "The humans aren't toying with us," said Admiral Taller of the Tsokan, his voice soft, but filled with an unshakable certainty. "They're sleeping. They don't realize their own potential, and they never have. Their entire civilization is built on self-contained conflicts, never fully understanding what they're capable of." Aroth was silent for a moment, processing the words. "So, you're telling me humanity has been sitting on a mountain of untapped destruction, and we've only seen a glimpse of it?" Admiral Taller nodded gravely. "They awaken only when necessary. Every battle we've fought with them, they've shown us just enough to remind us who's in control. They act only when provoked." Commander Arotha's mind raced. He had seen it firsthand, the swift, calculated strikes of human warships in past skirmishes, wiping out fleets as if it were an afterthought. But even then, the humans always retreated, their warriors going back to their peaceful existence, as if nothing had changed. They had the power to dominate, but they chose not to. "What if," Aroth whispered, his voice barely audible, "they wake up completely? What if they realize what they can do?" The room grew colder. The thought was terrifying. The Coalition's strength was undeniable, but the idea of facing humanity's full potential, the full wrath of a species that treated war like a mere game, sent shivers down the spine of every officer present. "There's only one way to ensure we don't face that reality," said General Zar, his sharp eyes narrowing. "We keep them asleep. We make sure they never realize what they can do. Arath glanced at the holographic display of Earth, its peaceful blue oceans and green continents a stark contrast to the chaos that brewed among the stars. The humans didn't want war. They didn't crave conquest. But if they were ever fully awakened, what would stop them from taking it all? What if we fail to keep them asleep? Yulok asked quietly. His voice, usually filled with confidence, now had a trace of doubt. We must not fail, said Admiral Taller. If we do, we won't just be fighting a species, we'll be fighting the gods of war. Meanwhile, light years away on a quiet, unremarkable space station orbiting Earth, Captain James of the United Earth Fleet was completely unaware of the turmoil that was unfolding in the far reaches of space. He sat back in his chair, staring at the stars beyond the station's viewport, a sense of peaceful indifference settling over him. Anything on the scanners, Lieutenant Chin? James asked lazily, his feet propped up on the console. Nope, Chin replied, not even bothering to look up from his book. Just like yesterday, and the day before that. James chuckled, stretching his arms. Well, let's hope it stays that way. Little did he know, the human's peaceful existence was about to be shattered. The time for slumber was over, and the galaxy would soon learn that humanity's power could no longer be ignored. The quiet hum of space was disrupted by the flashing lights of red alert as the Galactic Coalition's command center buzzed with activity. The room was filled with high-ranking officers from every corner of the galaxy, their eyes focused on the central screen displaying Earth. Despite its peaceful appearance, this small blue planet had become the center of an escalating crisis that no one had anticipated. Commander Arath, now more concerned than ever, stood at the front, watching the chaotic flow of data on the screen. They don't make sense, he muttered. The humans' responses, too precise, too calculated. How can they have been hiding this power all this time? A hushed silence followed as General Tsar of the Scorcha, the brutal warrior race, leaned forward, his red eyes glowing with growing concern. We were wrong. We thought we could control them. But now, the humans have shown us their strength, and it's only a matter of time before they realize they can do much more. The room shifted uncomfortably. The Scorcha, known for their merciless tactics, were shaken by the sudden shift in power dynamics. For years, they had been the scourge of the galaxy, conquering planet after planet. But against humanity, they had failed miserably, as if their enemies had been holding back. I don't understand, said Yulok, the Vrax tactician, his sharp features drawn in a frown. Why haven't they fought us before? Why now? Admiral Taller of the Tsoken, ever the calm strategist, sighed deeply, his mind whirring. The humans have always been on the periphery, participating in galactic conflicts only when forced to. They've been, asleep, perhaps, to the true nature of their potential. But they're waking up now. And if they choose to fight, they'll be unstoppable. The tension in the room was palpable. The coalition had always been in control of the galaxy, but now, for the first time in centuries, they had an unknown force to contend with. No one knew what humanity was truly capable of if they unleashed their full power. Arath knew the answer, it would mean the end of the coalition's reign. We must act before they fully wake up, Arath said, his voice heavy with urgency. If they continue to realize their potential, we'll be facing a force that's far beyond anything we've ever encountered. The entire galaxy will fall under their shadow. But not all the officers agreed. General Tsar slammed his fist on the table, his voice thick with anger. We cannot just let them continue to sleep. We need to force them into action, to make them fight. If we're not careful, they will rise up and tear through us like paper. Admiral Taller raised a hand, silencing the room. If we do that, we risk everything. If the humans awaken fully and sense the hostility, it could trigger something none of us are prepared for. They don't act unless necessary. We must keep them calm, keep them unaware. Our best chance is to ensure they never realize the full scope of their strength. Tsar's face twisted with frustration, but he held his tongue. He knew Talar was right. But the notion of leaving such a dangerous species unchecked felt like a recipe for disaster. So what do you propose? Yulok asked, his voice barely concealing the edge of doubt. Talar's eyes narrowed as he laid out his plan. We need to use subterfuge. Misinformation. Small, meaningless skirmishes, nothing too serious, just enough to keep the humans distracted. We let them think they are still in control, that they are still the apex predators, and they'll stay asleep. The room was silent as the officers digested the plan. It was risky, but it was their only option. If they could keep the humans pacified long enough, they might avoid a full-scale confrontation. The Tsokan admiral continued, we'll create false threats. The humans will react to them as they always have, swiftly and decisively, but they won't know that they're being manipulated. As long as we keep them focused on external enemies, they'll never turn their attention inward. We make them believe they are still in control, and that will keep them from realizing their own true power. The plan seemed foolproof, on paper. But Commander Arath had his doubts. What if the humans caught on? What if they started asking questions? The more Arath thought about it, the more he realized the coalition's situation was precarious. If humanity ever understood what they were capable of, they could shift the balance of power forever. Are we sure this will work? Arath asked. What if they begin to suspect something is wrong? What if they begin to connect the dots? Yulok's voice was grim. If they ever start to question us, we'll have no choice but to eliminate them completely. The silence in the room was deafening. The stakes had never been higher. For the first time, the Galactic Coalition found itself at a crossroads. And the question that lingered in the air was simple: could they stop humanity from waking up? Meanwhile, on Earth. On the surface of Earth, far from the power struggles of galactic politics, life continued as normal. The United Earth Fleet had been in a state of uneasy peace for years, with only routine patrols to keep their forces occupied. Captain James, along with his crew, had spent years in space, far from the bustling cities and bustling life of Earth itself. It had been peaceful. Too peaceful, in fact. Anything on the scanners, Lieutenant? Captain James asked, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. Nothing, Lieutenant Chen replied absently, his attention on a datapad. Same as usual. Boring, really. James smiled. Yeah, but it's the boring ones that save our skins. For years, nothing had happened. Humanity had remained a passive observer in the galactic order, completely unaware of the forces at play in the background. But now, something had changed. The recent attacks from the Scorcha, while swiftly dealt with, had left behind unsettling questions. James leaned forward in his chair, watching as the stars twinkled outside. He had no idea that the galaxy had just started waking up to the power of humanity. No idea that the coalition had begun to fear them. But that was about to change. The slumbering giant was stirring, and the galaxy had no idea what it was about to face. The first strike. The day the coalition's plan began to fall apart was not marked by great fanfare or blaring alarms. Instead, it began with a seemingly insignificant event on the edge of known space. A small faction of Scorcha warlords, eager for glory and tired of the coalition's cautious approach, decided to test the humans, once and for all. They believed the stories of humanity's power were nothing but exaggerated rumors. With their ships ready and their warriors prepared, the Scorcha made the fateful decision to attack an isolated human outpost. At first, the human response seemed as passive as always. The Scorcha warlords, confident in their superiority, launched a surprise assault, thinking it would be an easy victory. Their ships descended upon the outpost, unleashing a torrent of destructive firepower, certain they would crush the humans under their might. But then, something changed. The first sign of humanity's awakening came when the human fleet, which had seemed dormant for years, sprung to life. On board the flagship, Captain James of the United Earth Fleet stood in silence, watching the data feed from his sensors. The Scorcha were coming in fast, but there was something about their movements that didn't sit right with him. "Lieutenant Chen, status report," James asked calmly, even though a subtle unease gnawed at him. "Everything looks normal, Captain," Chen replied, eyes glued to his console. "But, the Scorcha fleet is moving in. It's a direct attack." "Right. Get ready," James muttered, more to himself than to his crew. "This won't be like the last few skirmishes." What followed was a seamless, ruthless display of military precision. The human fleet, which had been lying in wait, seemingly oblivious to the growing tensions in the galaxy, was now wide awake. As the first Scorcha ship fired upon the human outpost, the response was immediate, swift, coordinated, and overwhelming. The first wave of Scorcha ships was obliterated in seconds. The human ships, though outnumbered, moved with the precision of a species that had long hidden its true capabilities. Their weapons cut through the Scorcha like a hot knife through butter, their battle tactics efficient and devastating. The Scorcha commanders watched in stunned disbelief as their own warships fell, one after another. Captain James stood motionless at the helm of his flagship, a quiet storm brewing in his chest. The battle was unfolding before him with terrifying accuracy. It was as if the humans had been waiting for this exact moment for centuries. "Captain, their ships are retreating," Lieutenant Chen reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We've completely wiped them out." James nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the data streams flashing before him. "This is just the beginning," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He knew the Scorcha were just the first wave of a much larger storm. The humans were no longer the passive players in the galactic game, they had just thrown down the gauntlet. Back in the Coalition's command center, chaos erupted. "Impossible," General Zar growled, watching the real-time feed of the battle unfold on the holographic screen. "How could they have done this? How could they defeat us so easily?" Admiral Taller, usually calm and collected, looked visibly shaken. "This isn't just a victory. This is a warning. The humans are more than we thought. They didn't just win, they dominated." Commander Arath stood at the center of the room, deep in thought. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. "How did they do this?" he asked aloud. "We didn't even provoke them. They just responded. And with such precision." General Zar's eyes narrowed, his thoughts racing. Maybe they've always had this power. Maybe they were simply waiting for the right moment. Admiral Taller looked to the side, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "No. This isn't something they just stumbled upon. They knew what they were doing. They've been preparing for this moment. And now, they know what they're capable of." The room fell silent as the officers pondered the magnitude of what had just occurred. The Scorcha, once a terrifying force in the galaxy, had been annihilated in a matter of hours by a species that had been written off as irrelevant. The humans had not only awakened, they had unleashed something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Back on Earth, Captain James stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars once more. The battle was over, but the true significance of their victory was just beginning to settle in. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said quietly to Lieutenant Chen, who had joined him by the viewport. "We've just sent a message." Chen looked at him, puzzled. "A message to whom?" "To everyone," James said, his voice steady but with a hint of something deeper, something that had been awakening inside him as well. "The galaxy is about to know who we really are. And if they push us too far, they'll learn exactly what happens when humanity is forced to fight." The quiet of space was almost deafening as Captain James looked out into the vast unknown. Humanity had been silent for centuries, but now that silence had been broken. The galaxy would never be the same again. The silence of space had been shattered. The stars, once peaceful witnesses to the stillness of a distant galaxy, now seemed to hum with an energy that humanity had long kept dormant. The message sent by the humans' devastating victory over the Scorcha had been received across the galaxy, loud and clear. The Coalition, once sure of their unchallenged dominance, now found themselves staring at an unknown threat. The question that plagued their minds was no longer how the humans had defeated them so easily, it was how much further they were willing to go. Back in the Galactic Coalition's command center, the atmosphere was tense, thick with uncertainty. The victory of the human fleet over the Scorcha warlords had sent shockwaves through the leadership. It had been swift, brutal, and decisive. Everything the humans had done up until this point had been precisely controlled, and it was clear now that they were not a passive species. They had been waiting. But why? Commander Arath stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed as he examined the latest reports from Earth. His expression was grim, his thoughts a whirlpool of confusion and fear. "How do we stop them?" he muttered under his breath. The reality of the situation was beginning to dawn on him. Humanity was no longer the sleepy, backwater species it had once been. They had shown their power, and now the galaxy had no choice but to recognize it. Admiral Taller, always composed, leaned over the holographic display showing the aftermath of the battle. "We can't stop them," he said softly. "Not now. We underestimated them. And now they're awake." General Zar's sharp, reptilian eyes flicked to the display, where the scattered remains of the Scorcha fleet were shown in full. His usual bravado had faded, replaced with a rare look of unease. "They've made it clear. They're not playing by our rules anymore. We can't keep them in the dark. The humans are fully aware of their strength now. And they know that the entire galaxy has been underestimating them." Arath stood in silence for a moment. He had been part of countless battles, had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations, but this was different. The humans had done what no one else could, what no one had even dared to do. They had stayed dormant, waiting, and now, with a single, calculated strike, they had revealed themselves to be a force capable of toppling empires. "They've learned to strike with precision, using only the minimum amount of force necessary to annihilate their enemies," Arath said slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't just a battle, it was a statement. If they wanted to, they could sweep through the galaxy and leave nothing behind. But they chose not to. "Not yet." Taller nodded grimly. "They don't need to fight. They could easily dominate us if they chose. But for now, they've made their position clear, they won't be pushed." "Then we do what we always do," General Zar said, his voice cold and ruthless. "We fight them. We show them that they are not invincible." Arath shook his head, his mind flashing to the impossible question, what if humanity was already playing the game on their terms? "We can't fight them directly, Zar. We'll only push them further. They've shown us they don't need to fight unless they're forced to. The Scorcha made the mistake of pushing them. We need to make sure they never feel cornered." The room fell silent at Aratha's words. The idea that humanity wasn't interested in conquering the galaxy was a difficult pill to swallow. It meant that they weren't acting out of ambition, but out of sheer necessity, responding to threats only when absolutely needed. But now that they had woken, what could stop them? If they truly realized their potential, if they decided that they were tired of merely reacting and took action on their own terms, the Coalition would be powerless to stop them. A galaxy that once ignored Earth would be unable to stand against them. Meanwhile, on Earth. Back on Earth, Captain James had no idea just how far the ripples of his actions had spread across the galaxy. The victory over the Scorcha was only the beginning of something much larger, something that would change the course of human history. But on Earth, the situation seemed, for all intents and purposes, the same as it had always been. James stood in the command center of his flagship, watching as the stars glided by on the screens before him. His crew, though tired from the battle, shared his sense of relief. The Scorcha had been dealt with decisively, but there was no time to rest. His mind raced with the same question that had started to haunt the Coalition: what next? "Captain, we've received a transmission from the fleet," Lieutenant Chen said, walking up to him with a grim expression. The coalition is starting to take notice. They've sent a ceasefire offer. They want us to stand down. James raised an eyebrow. A ceasefire? After everything that just happened? Chen nodded. They're offering reparations. They're claiming the Scorcha attack was rogue, that they had no part in it. James chuckled dryly. Of course they are. They're scared. They know we've shown them our strength, and they're trying to make sure we don't take it any further. So, what's our move? Chen asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. James looked out at the vastness of space. The quiet that had once seemed comforting now felt heavy. The humans had always lived in peace, but that peace had been disrupted, not by their own hand, but by the actions of others. What would they do next? What kind of species would they become now that their true power had been awakened? We don't respond immediately, James said, his voice steady. We let them think we're going to back down. Let them believe we're just like all the other species in this galaxy, just waiting for someone to tell us what to do. But we'll be ready. They've forced us into this. Now, it's up to us whether we take the next step. The crew members glanced at each other, understanding the weight of his words. Humanity was no longer just a passive observer. They were a force capable of altering the fate of the galaxy, and they hadn't even fully realized it yet. The question was no longer whether they would rise, it was how high they would soar when they finally did. The decision was made. The humans, once asleep, were now fully awake. And the galaxy would soon learn that when humanity awakened, nothing, no power, no empire, no force, could stand in their way. The galaxy was no longer the peaceful place it had once been. The Scorch's defeat had sent ripples through every corner of the galaxy, but the humans, who had been quietly sleeping for centuries, were now awake. The Galactic Coalition, once confident in their ability to control the universe, found themselves facing a species they had long underestimated. The humans, whose military might had been demonstrated with devastating precision, now posed a challenge that no one had prepared for. And the coalition, divided and on edge, knew one thing for certain: the situation was spiraling out of control. In the heart of the Galactic Coalition's command center, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. Commander Aroth paced nervously as the latest intelligence reports flashed on the screen in front of him. The humans had not only responded to the Scorch's attack, but they had retaliated in a way that no one could have predicted. They had shown their strength, and now the galaxy was scrambling to figure out how to deal with them. What do we do now? General Zar's voice cracked the tense silence. The Scorcha were a force to be reckoned with, but they had been obliterated in hours by the humans. His confidence had been shattered, and now, doubt gnawed at him. We can't ignore them. Not anymore. We've seen what they can do. Admiral Taller, ever the strategist, leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. We can't confront them directly. They've made it clear they're not interested in conquest. But we have to act fast. If we give them the time and the opportunity, they'll take control of everything. Aratha's eyes flickered to the holographic display of Earth. His mind was working furiously. The humans were dangerous, too dangerous to leave unchecked. Yet their power was not their only strength. Their lack of ambition was equally disarming. They didn't seek to dominate the galaxy. They weren't interested in ruling over others. They fought only when forced into it. But the coalition's actions had pushed them into a corner, and now, they were awake. If we keep provoking them, it won't just be the Scorcha we'll have to worry about, Aroth said, his voice strained. If we push them too far, they'll realize what they're capable of, and that would be the end of everything we've built. General Zar shook his head in frustration. What do you propose, then? That we just sit back and let them do as they please? We need to play this carefully, Admiral Taller replied, his voice cold and calculating. We've made our move, and now we need to ensure they understand that we're not a threat. But we also need to make sure they stay unaware of their true potential. Arath leaned in, his expression dark. How do you propose we do that? We've already underestimated them. We pushed them into action, and now they're awake. If they decide to mobilize, there's no force in the galaxy that can stop them. Taller was quiet for a long moment before speaking. We need to make the humans think we're not a threat. We feed them misinformation, create minor skirmishes, just enough to keep them distracted, but not enough to provoke them into full-scale action. We keep them in check by making them believe they're still in control. The room was filled with a sense of unease as the leaders of the coalition processed Taller's plan. It was a dangerous game, one that could easily backfire. The humans weren't fools. What if they saw through the ruse? What if they caught on to what the coalition was trying to do? The consequences could be catastrophic. Meanwhile, on Earth. On Earth, the situation had grown tenser, though the humans themselves remained unaware of the full scope of the galactic tension. Captain James stood on the observation deck of his flagship, his eyes tracing the stars outside. The victory over the Scorcher was still fresh in his mind, but there was something nagging at him. A feeling that something bigger was unfolding, something that would force humanity to take action again. Captain, we've intercepted new communications from the Coalition, Lieutenant Chen said, walking up to him with a worried look on his face. They're offering reparations. They're claiming the Scorcher attack was rogue, and they want to de-escalate. James frowned. A ceasefire? His voice was skeptical. After everything that's happened, they expect us to just stand down. Chen nodded. They're scared. They know what we're capable of now. They're trying to avoid a war, but it's too late. James sighed, rubbing his chin. He knew that humanity had changed the course of the galaxy with their actions, but he hadn't anticipated the Coalition's immediate reaction. The reparations offer was a weak attempt at buying peace, but the humans weren't interested in negotiations. They weren't interested in playing by anyone else's rules. They think they can control us, James muttered under his breath. They think we're just another race they can bully. They don't understand that we're done being pushed around. He turned to Lieutenant Chen, his expression hardening. Prepare a message for the Coalition. We're not going to play their games. We won't start a war, but if they push us again, they'll regret it. Chen looked at him, confused. What are you suggesting, Captain? A full-scale attack? James shook his head, his eyes dark with resolve. Not an attack. A warning. Let them know that we're not interested in their terms. Let them know we will act when we're ready, and no one, gets to decide that for us. The galactic response. The Coalition leaders sat around the table, reading the message from Earth. It was blunt, to the point, and left no room for negotiation. We're not interested in your reparations, it said. We're not here to conquer, but we will not be controlled. Do not mistake our peace for weakness. If you force us into a corner, we will strike. General Czar slammed his fist on the table, furious. This is madness. They think they can intimidate us. We need to retaliate. Admiral Taller raised a hand, silencing the room. No. This is exactly what they want us to do. We've already pushed them too far. If we retaliate, we'll force them into full-scale action. We cannot afford to make them believe they are at war with us. Arath stood, looking out at the stars displayed on the central screen. His voice was quiet, but firm. The humans aren't asking for war, they're asking for respect. But we've made our mistake. Now, it's too late to undo it. The question is, what happens next? The room fell into tense silence, each leader wondering the same thing: could they still control the situation? Or had humanity, the slumbering gods of war, already decided their fate? The tension in the Galactic Command Center was nearly palpable. Commander Arath stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, his mind racing. The message from Earth had sent shockwaves through the Coalition. Humanity had made it clear, they were not interested in the reparations, nor were they willing to let the coalition dictate their actions. The message was simple, yet terrifyingly direct: if you push us again, we will act. As the weeks passed, the coalition's top leaders had discussed strategy after strategy, none of which seemed to provide a solution. The coalition, composed of multiple alien species, had dominated the galaxy for centuries, but now, facing the humans, they found themselves helpless. Every tactic they tried, whether subterfuge or small-scale military maneuvers, had only provoked a stronger reaction from Earth. Humanity wasn't backing down, and they weren't going to let anyone control their future. Do we strike first? General Zar's voice was gruff and filled with frustration. We've been waiting too long. If we don't act now, the humans will never take us seriously again. Admiral Taller shook his head, his calm demeanor never wavering. We strike first, we risk it all. If we provoke them into a full-scale conflict, we'll lose. They won't be cornered easily. They've shown us that they fight with a purpose. And they fight to win. But they don't want war, Arath interjected, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. Their strategy isn't about conquest. It's about defense. They don't fight unless forced to. If we give them a reason to fight, they'll wipe us out. I'm convinced of that. The room was silent for a moment, each officer considering Aratha's words. The last few battles had made it clear, humanity wasn't just a species with surprising military capability, they were a species that had perfected the art of responding at precisely the right moment, with deadly accuracy. We can't let them think they're invincible, Zar growled. We have to show them we're not afraid. We need to make sure they understand that we still have power. Admiral Taller stood, his gaze sharp as he turned to the others. I'm not suggesting we stand down. I'm suggesting we proceed with extreme caution. If we continue to push, we risk triggering the very thing we fear. The debate raged on in the command center, but no one could offer a solution that satisfied everyone. The fear of facing humanity's full potential was becoming a reality. What could the coalition do when a species they had dismissed for so long had suddenly shown that they were capable of taking down entire fleets without hesitation? Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain James was preparing for what he knew would come next. The tension had reached a breaking point. The ceasefire offer from the coalition had been a futile attempt to placate the humans, but they had made it clear that they were not going to be controlled. Captain James stood on the bridge of his flagship, his face grim as he looked out at the stars. Lieutenant Chen, what's the status? Chen, his eyes scanning the data streams, looked up from his console. We've intercepted more transmissions from the coalition. They're preparing for something. We don't know exactly what, but they're moving their fleets into position. James's eyes narrowed. He had known the coalition wouldn't back down, they were too proud, too afraid of losing control. But he also knew one thing, the humans had awakened, and there was no going back now. Prepare the fleet for any eventuality, James ordered, his voice steady. We won't initiate anything, but if they come for us, we won't hesitate. Make sure every ship is ready. We need to show them we're not just going to sit around and wait for their next move. Chen nodded. Understood, Captain. The fleet will be ready. James's thoughts drifted for a moment. Humanity had always been a species that valued peace, but now the path to peace seemed blocked by those who refused to understand. The humans weren't interested in war, but if it came to it, they would defend themselves. And they would not lose. Back in the coalition's command center, the decision had been made. It was too late for peace. There was no turning back now. The calm before the storm. The next few days passed with an eerie calm. Both sides knew that a confrontation was inevitable, but neither wanted to be the first to strike. The coalition's fleet, the mightiest in the galaxy, was poised and ready for battle, but the humans had not moved from their position. They waited, confident in the knowledge that the coalition knew what would happen if they pushed too far. On Earth, Captain James and his crew were preparing for the worst. They had no illusions about what the coalition was capable of. But what made the humans dangerous was not just their military might, it was their determination. They would not be enslaved, not by anyone. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission," Lieutenant Chen said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's from the coalition. They're demanding we stand down. They're threatening full-scale war if we don't comply." James chuckled darkly. "They really don't get it, do they? They still think they can intimidate us. It's almost funny." He turned to Chen, his expression hardening. "Get our fleet ready. They want war. They'll get it." The humans had made their decision. They would not bend, not for the coalition, not for anyone. And if the galaxy wanted to challenge them, then they would show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of. The moment of truth. On both sides of the conflict, the clock was ticking down to the inevitable moment when diplomacy would give way to war. The coalition's fleet loomed just outside Earth's orbit, a wall of unstoppable force. The humans, standing ready in their ships, waited for the first sign of aggression. Admiral Taller stood aboard the command ship, watching as the human fleet gathered in the distance. He knew that this moment was the beginning of something far greater than he could have imagined. If the humans did not back down, this war would be like no other. Humanity had proven that they could strike with precision and devastating force. The silence in space was broken by a single communication from Captain James: "We don't want this war, but if you force us into it, we won't hesitate. Stand down, or we will make you." The message was clear, its tone unwavering. The coalition had pushed humanity too far, and now, the humans were ready to fight for their survival. "Admiral," one of the officers aboard Taller's ship reported, "they're not backing down. The humans have mobilized their entire fleet. They're prepared for anything." Taller's mind raced as the gravity of the situation set in. Prepare for battle. But remember, if we do this, there's no going back. The future of the stars. The silence of space was deafening. For months, the galaxy had held its breath, waiting for the inevitable conflict between humanity and the Galactic Coalition. Both sides had drawn their lines in the sand, and now the moment had arrived. The Coalition's fleet hovered just outside Earth's orbit, its weapons primed and ready. Meanwhile, the human fleet, no longer passive or dormant, stood firm, their resolve unshakable. Captain James stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the holographic projection of the Coalition fleet. The message had been clear: the Coalition wanted war, and they would bring everything they had to bear against humanity. James knew that this would be a fight unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Coalition had underestimated the humans for far too long, and now they were about to face the consequences. "Captain, the Coalition fleet is positioning itself for a direct assault," Lieutenant Chen reported, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. James nodded grimly, his eyes still locked on the display. "Let them come," he said softly. "Let them see what happens when they awaken the sleeping gods of war." He turned to his crew, his voice resolute. "Prepare all ships for battle. We're not just defending Earth, we're defending every human soul in this galaxy. And if the Coalition wants a fight, they'll get one." As the human fleet moved into position, the weight of their decision settled in. This wasn't just about winning or losing a battle. It was about asserting their place in the galaxy, about showing the entire universe that humanity would never again be pushed around or manipulated. They had awakened, and the galaxy would have to come to terms with that reality. The battle unfolds. The first strike came from the Coalition. Their fleet surged forward, weapons charging, as they tried to break through humanity's defenses. The battle was fierce and fast, the sound of laser fire and explosions filling the empty void of space. The humans responded with unmatched precision. Each ship, each pilot, knew their role in the battle, moving like a well-oiled machine. They had been forced into this conflict, but they fought not out of desire for domination, but out of necessity. Captain James stood at the helm of his ship, issuing commands with quiet authority. Target their command ships. We take out their leadership, and the rest will scatter. Fire on my mark. With a single motion, he gave the order, and the human fleet opened fire. The power of their weapons ripped through the coalition ships, leaving them in smoldering ruins. The humans didn't just fight with technology, they fought with a purpose, with a clarity of mind that the coalition had never anticipated. Direct hit on their flagship, Captain. Chen shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. They're retreating. The fleet is in disarray. James looked at the retreating coalition ships, his heart pounding. He knew the battle wasn't over, but this was a turning point. The humans had struck with such force, such deadly intent, that the coalition was beginning to realize they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Humanity had become the hunters. But just as the humans began to press their advantage, a new order came through from the coalition's command center: retreat. Reassess. Do not push further. The message was a sign of defeat. The coalition, once certain of their superiority, was now pulling back. They had failed to crush humanity's spirit, and worse, they had underestimated the humans' capacity to fight back. The gods of war were no longer asleep. They had awakened, and they were ready to defend their place in the universe. Aftermath, the new order. As the coalition ships retreated into the vastness of space, the human fleet stood victorious. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The coalition had been forced to retreat, but there was no denying that they would be back, and next time, they would come with everything they had. Back on Earth, the mood was somber. The victory was sweet, but Captain James knew that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had made its statement, but now the real work began. The coalition would regroup, and they would find a way to confront the humans again. But next time, humanity would be ready. James stood in front of a large window, looking out at the stars. The calm of space was almost unnerving after the chaos of battle, but the silence was also a reminder of what humanity had accomplished. They had faced a superior force, and they had won. For the first time in centuries, humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as passive observers, but as equals. What happens now, Captain? Lieutenant Chen asked, his voice soft but filled with uncertainty. James turned to face him, a slight smile on his lips. We keep moving forward. We defend our people. We stand ready for whatever comes next. As he spoke, the weight of the future began to settle in. The battle was won, but the war for the galaxy's future had only just begun. Humanity had shown its power, and now the galaxy would have to decide whether it would respect that power, or continue to challenge it. A new era for humanity. The war had ended, but the peace was fragile. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and it was clear that their place in the stars could no longer be denied. The coalition would need time to recover, and in that time, the humans would be ready. They had proven that they were not a species to be underestimated, and they would not be pushed aside again. As the days passed, Captain James and his crew stood vigilant. They knew the galaxy was watching, and they knew that the humans were now a force to be reckoned with. But even in the aftermath of battle, one thing was certain: humanity had finally awakened, and the stars would never be the same. We've shown them what we can do, James said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Now, we wait. We wait for the next move. And with that, the humans, once dormant and ignored, became the guardians of their own destiny. The galaxy would learn to respect humanity's power, or it would fall under the weight of it. The future was uncertain, but humanity was ready. The gods of war were awake, and they would never go back to sleep.